listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Marie Murphy. I'm a relationship coach and I help people who are engaging in anything they think counts as infidelity to deal with their feelings, clarify what they want, and make decisions about what they're going to do. No shame, no blame, no judgments. Cheaters get a pretty bad rap, and there are a lot of people out there who will tell you that if you're cheating, you are doing something that is unequivocally bad, and maybe that you are unequivocally bad. But I believe otherwise. I believe that you are entitled to guidance and support that respects the fullness of your humanity and the complexity of your situation, no matter what you're doing or have been doing. So if you're ready to talk about your infidelity situation, you can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. All sessions are completely compassionate and completely confidential. So let's talk and find you some relief. All right. Today, the most general overarching point of the episode is that what you tell yourself matters. What you tell yourself about yourself matters. What you tell yourself about your experience of life matters. What you tell yourself about other people matters. What you tell yourself about what is and isn't possible matters. And what you tell yourself about your mental state matters. So it's really important for us to become more conscious of the things we tell ourselves and consciously decide whether or not we want to keep telling ourselves those things. Here are 3 things I highly recommend you become aware of telling yourself and then stop telling yourself as soon as possible. Are you ready? The first thing is, I don't know. Stop telling yourself, I don't know. The second is, I'm confused. Notice yourself saying, I'm confused, and then stop it. And the third is, it's hard, or maybe it's too hard. Do you ever tell yourself that it's too hard? Do you ever tell yourself that things are hard? I want you to be on the lookout for telling yourself those things. Now, here's the thing. These kinds of statements or thoughts may sound totally innocuous. And moreover, you may think that they're just true. They may sound like neutral observations. If you say these kinds of things to yourself, it may seem like you're just describing the reality of your experience. And it may not seem like there's anything wrong with saying, I don't know, or I'm confused, or it's hard. So let's talk about the distinction between thoughts and circumstances, which is something I've referred to on this podcast before. A circumstance is a fact of our lives. It's something we can prove is true, something that any reasonable observer could agree on. And a thought is a sentence in our mind. It's a string of words put together that has meaning for us. And we humans are making meaning out of our world and our experience of life all the time. We're constantly forming thoughts about anything and everything. And that isn't a bad thing. It's just what our minds do. But what happens is we tend to get pretty invested in our thoughts. We tend to believe that if we're thinking something, it must be true. And if we think something is true, we tend to behave as if it is true. And that has real consequences for our lives. So one of the most important things we need to do if we want to make changes in our lives is become more aware of our thinking and then examine whether or not our thinking is serving us. More than one thing can always be true about any given circumstance. There's never only one possible interpretation of any given fact or any set of facts. So with that in mind, let's talk about what happens when we tell ourselves that we don't know. First of all, is the statement, I don't know, a circumstance? Is it ever a fact that you don't know something? Well, maybe it is. If someone asks you the name of the current Secretary General of the United Nations and you do not know it, it might be true to say that you don't know. And admittedly, I chose this example question because I was not sure of the name of the current United Nations Secretary General, and I had to look it up. It's Antonio Guterres. So that was something that I did not know, or at least didn't remember. And I decided to look it up. So now I do know, and I will remember. But here's the thing. So often we tell ourselves that we don't know about something that isn't so straightforward, something that we can't look up and find a single answer to. There are many questions in life to which there is not a singular answer, which we either know or don't know. And a lot of my clients and a lot of humans in the world are grappling with questions about what they want to do with a particular romantic relationship or particular relationships. And they'll often tell me that they don't know what they want, right? And once I question clients who say this a little bit, it quickly becomes apparent that it isn't quite true that they don't know what they want. They know some things that they want. They may be very sure that they want certain things. They may be sort of sure that they want other things. And then there may be some specific other things that they're evaluating or considering whether they want or don't want. But the point overall is that their statement, I don't know, does not end up being as accurate of a description of what's going on with them as it seemed to be. And this is really important because when we tell ourselves that we don't know, that impacts our action. What do you do when you tell yourself that you don't know something? Well, some of you might say, well, I just go and figure it out, or I look it up, or I decide, kind of like my example with the UN Secretary General's name. But the action of looking something up does not come from the thought, I don't know. It comes from the thought of, oh, I'm going to find out about this, or I'm going to learn about this thing, or I'm going to decide what my answer is, or I'm going to discover what the answer is if it's something external to us that we have to find out, right? When we tell ourselves that we don't know, on the other hand, especially if we say it over and over and over again, we usually spin our wheels. We don't take action. We don't try to find out any answers. We don't try to get from not knowing to knowing because we effectively believe that we don't know how to get out of the state of not knowing. And that's why telling ourselves things like, I don't know, matters. It's because that belief will inform the way we act, and those actions or inactions will have consequences. So here's a common example of what this can look like in infidelity situations. Someone will be married or in a committed relationship, and they'll be having an affair with another person. They'll be involved with another person. And the whole situation seems big and scary and overwhelming to them, stressful and anxiety inducing. And they've preemptively decided that there's no good outcome to be found. So they just keep telling themselves that they don't know what they want and they don't know what to do. And unsurprisingly, this leads to only taking the kinds of actions that perpetuate the status quo. And then the status quo keeps going. And the continuation of the status quo becomes evidence to this person that change isn't really possible. And the whole situation truly is an impossible mess. And this is not a fun place to be. And that's why it is so important to stop telling yourself that you don't know what you want. The antidote to telling yourself that you don't know something is to start to establish what you do know. You do know some things. I promise you do. And if you really think you don't, schedule an appointment with me and I will pull it out of you. I promise. You may need to break your situation down into smaller pieces to see that it is true that you do know some things. And that's fine. So if you're married and you're also involved with someone else, and the question is, what do you want to do about all of that? You may think that you don't know what you want in terms of ultimate comprehensive outcomes. And that's fine. So what do you know for sure? Well, probably a lot of things. For instance, you might know that you appreciate many things about your relationship with your affair partner. You might also appreciate many aspects of your relationship with your spouse. You may know exactly how you want to feel in your romantic life, right? You may know a few things that you know you want to experience in a romantic relationship. You may know a a few qualities that you want your romantic partner to have. And this is where you start, right? We all have to begin with small steps sometimes, and that's okay. And if this seems complicated, that's okay too. I can help you do this. You don't have to do it alone. Now, many humans do not like uncertainty very much. So when we don't know the entire answer to a big multi-part question, we sometimes freak out because we can't fix the whole thing at once. But not being able to fix the whole thing at once is not a problem. Not having all of the answers at once is not a bad thing. It's okay to take it one piece at a time because really you can only take it one piece at a time. So instead of telling yourself that you don't know what you want out of your situation, you can start to affirm to yourself that you are certain of certain things. You are certain of some things, even if you are also figuring other things out, even if you're also in the process of making decisions about other things. You can tell yourself how very willing you are to figure things out and how willing you are to come to greater and greater clarity and certainty. Notice that these are very different things to tell yourself than I don't know, right? The essential truth in there may be the same. You may be grappling with questions that you don't have all the answers to yet. That's one way of putting it. But telling yourself that you're willing to cultivate certainty is so different from saying, I don't know. Now, here's why we may resist cultivating certainty. Telling ourselves that we don't know what we want is a really great way to avoid taking action. And we may not do this consciously. Like I said earlier, when we tell ourselves we don't know, we may just think that we're telling ourselves the truth, right? But whether we do it consciously or not, one of the effects of telling ourselves that we don't know is usually indecision and inaction. And when I say it like that, it may sound so incredibly obvious, but when it's happening in our life, it may not be that obvious at all. Here's a weird thing to be aware of. Although uncertainty can be scary, certainty can be scary too. If we're facing a decision that we're afraid to make because of changes that we think will come from making that decision, telling ourselves that we don't know what we want is a protective mechanism of sorts. If we don't know, then we don't have to do anything. And that means we don't have to rock the boat. We don't have to take risks. We don't have to disrupt the status quo. And sometimes we don't want to give up that protection. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to start noticing when you tell yourself that you don't know something. Just notice. And then ask yourself if you really don't know. Notice that you probably know something about whatever it is you think you don't know about, unless it really is a question that only has one correct answer. So what do you know? Ask yourself that. You don't have to act on any of the things that you identify that you do know. You don't have to take any action at all. But I do want to encourage you to start to show yourself that you are sure of more than you think. You do know more than you think. And that knowing things and being certain of what you want doesn't just fall out of the sky and hit you on the head one day. If you want to be certain of anything, you have to be willing to be certain of things. And you have to be willing to affirm what you know to yourself. The good news and the bad news is we can either use our minds to cultivate certainty or we can use our minds to cultivate uncertainty. You get to choose. Now, very similar to the thought, I don't know, is I'm confused. Telling ourselves that we're confused can be a weird cover for other thoughts or a way of avoiding other thoughts. For example, sometimes when we say I'm confused, what we really mean is I don't like my options. Or more accurately, we mean that we don't like the options that we think we have. We may actually have a lot more options than we think we do. We often do. But when we think we're in a really bad predicament and we don't like any of the options that we think are on the table for us, we may tell ourselves that we're confused. But is that true? Or might it be more appropriate to say that we don't like the options that we think we have? That might be a lot more accurate, and it may be the more helpful thing to tell ourselves. When we tell ourselves we're confused, what are we likely to do? You can think about that and answer that one for yourself. But I will tell you that a lot of folks in infidelity situations tell themselves they're confused And then they feel, wait for it, confused. And then they ruminate and they get lost in unhelpful thought spirals and they don't actively seek out clarity. Are you sensing a pattern here? There definitely is one. What we tell ourselves about our state of mind matters. We think we're just reporting the news when we say things like, I'm confused or I don't know, but those are not neutral observations. Those statements are acts of creation. Now, I will tell you that I once had a coach who was a little too mean for my liking, who told me some things about confusion very sternly. I can't remember exactly how she put it. She might have said something like, there's no such thing as being confused, or just decide to not be confused anymore, or something to that effect. But she said it in such a mean way. And it made me want to cry at the time. I was scared. And I was, the delivery of her messages did not land particularly well with me at the time. But in the years since then, I've thought a lot about her teachings and I've thought a lot about my own experiences of confusion. And of course, I've worked with many clients to address their confusion. So, given all of that, all of my painful reflections and many years later, here's how I suggest you think about confusion. Confusion, or a state of bewilderment or uncertainty or lack of clarity, may arise for us for various reasons. But even if it arises for reasons that are beyond our control, or at least partially beyond our control, we get to decide if we want to indulge in confusion or perpetuate confusion or work our way out of confusion. There may be times when something happens in our lives and we just don't know what to make of it. We don't know what we think about it. We don't know how to organize our thinking about it. Or we're faced with a choice and we don't know what we want to do just yet because it's just happened. It's totally new and we just don't have any framework for understanding it. And that's fine. But once we recognize that we feel confused or we think we're confused, we get to decide what we're going to do about it. Are we going to start to look for certainty? Are we going to start to intentionally find our way out of the fog, even if we can only do that one little step at a time? Or are we going to lament our unfortunate state of confusion and stay there? A lot of times, if we think we're confused, we just kind of wait for something to happen. We think that our circumstances will change or we'll have some sort of revelation or information will fall out of the sky and hit us on the head. And I will freely admit that I used to think this way, right? I've thought this way many times in my life about matters big and small. And I can tell you from my own experience, and of course, from working with other people, that this is rarely the way it works. Yes, there are occasionally times when something major happens externally to us, and that changes things, and we don't think we're confused anymore. But why would we want to wait for some sort of act of God or anything beyond our control in order for us to take charge of our own destiny? If you think you're confused, you can choose to start to get unconfused. Now, if you want to indulge in confusion, that is fine. That is always your prerogative. But if you're going to do that, do it consciously. Choose confusion consciously. Don't just tell yourself that you're confused and there's nothing you can do about it and that's all there is to it. That's not true. When I work with people who say they're confused, and of course I do this for myself as well, I start with helping them get really clear on what exactly they're confused about. That might sound simple, and in a sense it is, but a lot of the time we don't find it easy to define our problem in specific terms. And I'm pretty sure that Albert Einstein said something to this effect at one point. I believe somebody asked him, if you had an hour to solve a problem, how would you go about doing it? And I think he said something to the effect of, I would use the first 58 minutes to define the problem, right? So whether that anecdote is true or not, whether or not that's something that's just been turned into myth over the ages, doesn't really matter because it's such a good point. It is so hard to reduce confusion when you're working with an undefined problem or a moving target. We've got to figure out what exactly we are confused about and why. Now, that brings me back to my earlier point about confusion often being a way we mask not liking the options we think we have, or a way of not telling ourselves that we don't like the options we think we have. So, sometimes people will tell me that they're in a situation that has only two ways out and both of them are bad. For example, people will tell me that they can either stay in their marriage, even though they're reasonably unhappy and have been for a while, or they can get a divorce and have everyone they care about be mad at them and then risk regretting their own choice later and being just as unhappy outside of their marriage as they were within it. And since both of those options sound terrible to them, they are quote unquote confused about what they want to do. So here's the problem. These are not your only two options, period. In that kind of a situation, those are not the only two paths. And it may be hard to see this within the framework of your current thinking, but that's partially the point. When you tell yourself you're confused, you may not be able to see anything other than your confusion or the things that are supposedly confusing. When we tell ourselves we're confused, we feel confused and we tend to stay stuck in our unhelpful ways of thinking. And does this help us make change? No, it does not. Now, unless you have some experience managing your mind and critically examining your own thinking, it may be very hard to see that your confusion is optional. And it may be hard to see that the options that you're afraid you are limited to are not actually your only options. So as a result of this, it may be incredibly difficult to move forward or out of confusion. And this is one of the reasons why working with a coach is so incredibly valuable. One of the points of coaching, as I practice it and as many others practice it, is to help you see what your mind is doing so that you can better get out of your own way. We drive ourselves crazy and we place incredible limits on our lives through our thinking. And a good coach can help you see where you are keeping yourself confused or stuck through your thought processes and help you get out of that. Okay. The third thing I want you to stop telling yourself right now is it's hard. Now, again, this often seems like one of those statements that's just true. We experience something to be hard, so it is, or at least that's how it seems. And we also tend to think, who is anyone to tell us that we can't say that something is hard? How dare anyone else deny us the reality of our experience, right? Here's the thing, people. You can say that something is hard if you want to. But what happens when you say that to yourself? And do you like what happens when you say that to yourself? For some people, the word hard does have positive connotations. And if that's the case for you, then that's fine. That's great. But for a lot of us, the word hard does not have positive connotations, at least in many contexts. And when we tell ourselves that something is hard, we often mean that it's kind of bad. Hard equals bad, more or less. Or hard equals scary. Or hard means we shouldn't have to do it. We say things like, it's too hard, as if there is an objective amount of hardness that we can and cannot tolerate or should not have to deal with. Now, whether or not something is hard is a matter of our thinking. Difficulty is not an objective thing, nor is ease. One person's challenge is another person's cakewalk. One person's hard is another person's easy. Now, the point is not that we need to dismiss or minimize our experiences of challenge or difficulty. Rather, the point is that the way we think about challenge and difficulty matter. Notice the difference between saying that something is hard and saying that something is difficult. That might feel a little bit different when you think about it that way. And then notice the difference between saying that something is hard and saying that something is challenging. That might feel even different still. The words you use, even when you are speaking silently to yourself in the privacy of your own mind, will have an impact on your life. Most of the time when I'm talking with people about things being hard, we're talking about erections. Just kidding. I am super sad today, and I will tell you why later. So I'm kind of in this strange emotional state, and I have got to get my, I don't know, I guess they're my giggles in where I can. Not that, erections are like funny. Well, I guess they could be, but I'm not saying that erections are worthy about joking about. Um, no, I do. Although I do talk with clients about erections, I talk about emotional discomfort way more than I talk about erections. And a lot of people tell me that feeling their emotional discomfort is hard. Feeling uncomfortable feelings is really hard. And that being willing to practice writing out uncomfortable emotions rather than resisting them or avoiding them is really, really hard. And the implication is often that because it is hard, it's too hard for them to do it. So they don't really need to try it. I talk with lots of people about embracing emotional discomfort and being willing to tolerate emotional discomfort and the benefits of being willing to feel discomfort instead of resisting it or avoiding it. And a lot of people agree intellectually that this makes sense. But when it comes to being willing to put this into practice, a lot of times people say, oh, but it's just so hard. Like, I know you're telling me this and I get it, but it's just so hard. If you're in the midst of an experience that you think of as hard, I want to suggest that if you look closer, you may find that what's also true of the experience is that you don't like it or that it's unfamiliar to you or both. But what if it were okay to not like something and do it anyway? But there are a lot of things that you don't really like that you do anyway, right? And the reason is probably that you have good reasons for doing those things, that you believe it's important to do those things, even if you don't like them. And similarly, what if it were okay for something to be unfamiliar to you and for you to perhaps not really like that unfamiliarity or the awkwardness of the unfamiliarity? What if you could do it anyway? Now, it's never incumbent upon us to do anything we don't want to do. But a lot of times, getting what we most want in life requires us to do things that we don't like, that we may think of as hard. Getting most of the things that we really want in life requires us to experience discomfort and sometimes quite a bit of it. Just about any major changes in your romantic life are going to entail some uncomfortable feelings. And these uncomfortable feelings may be intense, they may be prolonged, and they may be prolonged and intense. And a lot of people tell me that the fear of dealing with those feelings is what keeps them from making changes in their romantic lives, even when they claim to really want those changes. They think that dealing with the pain will just be too hard. I can promise you that dealing with pain will probably be uncomfortable by definition. I can promise you that if you're not in the habit of consciously working with your emotions, doing so or learning to do so will be different than relating to your emotions in a less conscious way. And doing things that are different from what you're used to doing does take effort. And it can indeed be challenging to do things that are different and take effort. But is that a bad thing? The next time you think that something is hard, try this. Ask yourself if you think that the thing is challenging. Is the hard thing challenging? My guess is that your answer will be yes. Right? You could think of the thing that you're thinking of as hard as a thing that is challenging instead of hard, right? At least potentially. So if you decide that yes, this thing could be considered challenging instead of hard, ask yourself if the challenge is worth the effort and the potential discomfort. If the answer is yes, then just stop telling yourself that it's hard. Tell yourself that this is challenging, but you're willing to take on the challenge. And if the answer is no, the challenge is not worth the effort and the potential discomfort, then don't do the thing. The point here is to put the power back in your own hands, or more accurately, in your own mind. You may want to start thinking about the things you've been thinking of as hard in a way that's more helpful for you. Thinking of them as hard may be anything but helpful. If the underlying thought beneath it is hard is I don't want to do it, then remember that you have choices. Decide how to not do it. Decide how to get this thing out of your life, whatever it is, or figure out how you can think about it differently. Doing one of these two things is a lot more empowering of thinking that something, a lot more empowering than thinking that something is hard and avoiding it as a result, or believing that because something is hard, you won't possibly be able to do it. So you're not even going to try. And that's what we sometimes do with emotional discomfort. We sometimes believe that it's going to be so hard to deal with intensely uncomfortable emotions that we're better off figuring out how to not have to feel those emotions instead of being willing to feel them, even if we have to learn how to do so. And even if doing so is different from what we're used to doing, and that takes effort. The problem with trying to avoid our uncomfortable emotions is that, as with so many other quote unquote hard things, is that the strategy only works for so long. There are plenty of things we can opt out of in life, but there are a lot of things that aren't optional. And emotional discomfort is one of those elements of the human experience that is pretty much inevitable. It's kind of like weather. Maybe some of us get more heat, some of us get more snow, some of us get more hurricanes, some of us get more tornadoes, some of us get droughts. And at the rate we're going, we're going to get a lot more of all of it, in addition to, hopefully, doing more to address the root causes of extreme weather. We're going to have to figure out how to deal with it, right? So no matter what, we're going to get weather. We don't know what kind necessarily, or maybe we know we're going to get more of some than another. And hopefully we can mitigate the extreme weather to some extent through human action, concerted human action. But even if we do, the weather's still going to come, right? And the same is true with our emotions. When we learn how to manage our minds, we can mitigate some of our extreme emotions. But no matter what, since we're human, we're going to experience intense emotions at times. And some of those emotions are going to be potent and uncomfortable. And so we're better off reorienting ourselves to hard things like uncomfortable emotions and choosing ways of thinking about things like uncomfortable emotions that serve us, rather than continuing to think in ways that don't make the hard thing any easier and don't enable us to take actions to contend with the problem we consider hard. All right. Since I mentioned it earlier, I'm going to tell you why I'm sad today. My beloved dog died a few days ago. We put him to sleep. He went from being fine to not fine to far worse than not fine pretty quickly. So, in addition to attempting to take in the sheer fact of his absence, I didn't have any time to get used to the idea that the end was coming. So, I'm feeling a lot of feelings right now, a lot of intensely uncomfortable feelings right now, including shock, emptiness, grief, sadness, longing, disbelief, stunned, right? And feeling these feelings does not feel good. But what I tell myself about the experience of these feelings matters a lot. If I tell myself that it's hard to feel sad or that I shouldn't have to feel sad, then I'm going to feel terrible. If I can allow myself to feel sad and shocked and stunned and discombobulated, then I can be present with the sheer immediate experience of these feelings without adding an additional layer of difficulty to the experience. If I tell myself it's hard to feel the way I feel, then I'd probably resist the feelings or look for a way out of the feelings. And believe me, I've done that plenty of times in my life, but I think I've finally gotten to the point where I know it just doesn't work. If I tell myself, on the other hand, that it's uncomfortable to feel my uncomfortable feelings, but that I'm willing to feel uncomfortable, the quality of the experience changes dramatically. I can look at this stuff. I can hold all of these feelings as part of the richness of being human, right? And that's totally different from saying this is hard and therefore I can't do it. Okay, people, notice the things you tell yourself. Notice if you say to yourself, I don't know, or I'm confused, or it's hard. If you say those things, notice what happens when you do. Our thoughts are our operating system. So what you tell yourself you believe matters. What you tell yourself about your mental state matters. What you tell yourself about the quality of your experience matters, or your capacity to deal with your life experience matters. What you tell yourself about what you know and don't know matters. All right, everyone, that's it for today. If you would like my help sorting out your infidelity situation, let's work together. You can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. I offer confidential, compassionate coaching via Zoom so we can work together no matter where you're located. Have an amazing week. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.